Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome to SD52 Coffee and Conversation. My name is T. McClinty. I am SD52 and CD2 Outreach and Inclusion Officer. And I will be your moderator today. Ron is on vacation, traveling, and our chair is touring. She sent me a message. She says she's touring in Salzburg, Austria today. So good for her. So I'm excited that we have a special guest from Common Cause here, who I'm going to just actually turn it over to you and have you introduce yourself and tell us about Common Cause.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for creating time for me this morning. I'm super stoked to get a chance to talk to y'all and answer your questions, etc. I'm Annastacia. I'm the Executive Director for Common Cause Minnesota. For those of you who may not be aware of who Common Cause is, we are a nationwide nonprofit who many describe as a watchdog of democracy. We typically get engaged in anything and everything that has to do with not just voter rights, but like media and democracy, money and politics. A lot of what you saw the last few years around ethics, and now we're getting engaged with SCOTUS and the whole issue of whether or not we should have a code of conduct. What we like to do is engage our base, engage our members. There's about 1.5 million of us nationwide. We've got offices in 29 different states. I lead the Minnesota office. In Minnesota, we've got a little over 18,000 folks. Minnesota's demographic in our base tends to be a little different than other states in that, of course, as always, Minnesota tends to be very issue-oriented, and so our base tends to reflect that. Our two largest members in our base are Republicans and Democrats. We've got a potpourri of various other groups, and they're pretty much all over the state, although I'd say, we're in the process of trying to figure that out now because every summer we do this, but I would say guesstimate, it's educated guess, is that the metro and first ring suburb, and then the second exurb kind of area still tends to be where a little over half of our base is at. So that makes us a very, how would I put it? It makes us folks that holds power accountable. How about that? So I know Karen knows me fairly well, and I'm sure she's heard me say this many times before, but I always feel that every day I leave the Capitol campus and I go through Twitter, and somebody from each side of the aisle and each side of the chamber is alleging that we are aligned with their partisan agenda is a damn good day at the Capitol. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And, do you have an office here in the Twin Cities?
Actually, I do. It's off the Capitol campus, off of Rice and Charles. We like to be where the action is. Plus, we also like to be a spot where our constituents are able to come, park their cars, not worry about, whether they have money or not, for the growing increase in parking and the growing battles over spaces on the Capitol campus. So yes, we actually office share with the League of Women Voters. They're a close partner.
Oh, good. Yeah. I actually didn't know too much about Common Cause, but I knew your work. I didn't know until Karen introduced us, and I think a previous coffee conversation, I learned more about Common Cause, and you guys are doing some great work. Can you talk a little bit about the election protection program and why it's important for people?
Absolutely. That's actually one of our Gold Star programs here, actually nationwide. We're part of a nationwide table of, I think, close to 100 different nonpartisan organizations that got together decades ago and decided, we really need to make sure that at the state level and the local level, we are ensuring fair, free, and secure elections. And so we run the Minnesota statewide election protection program. What it really consists of is what I call our democracy champions. These are folks like you all. Many of them have done this various years. Others are newbies that say, hey, I just need to make sure that in my community, people know what's going on, especially this year more than ever, because we had some amazing work done at the Capitol around expanding access to the ballot. We'll talk about that later. But it's really important that our constituents gets reliable, accurate information from us and doesn't fall for the disinformation or misinformation, especially these last few election cycles, from social media, from unintended friends or family members that might come across someone that shares misinformation, etc. So just to give you an example, the last election cycle, we had about 1,600 or so. We always get more folks that register and then they decide, well, I think I want to do social media monitoring. Our social media monitoring component consists of folks that we train, and we've got a nifty little platform kind of tool, and we're able to look at what's happening in Instagram, what's happening in Twitter, just because we put in words like, voter fraud, or we put in words that are, used by some of the fringe groups to try to dissuade people to turn out to the polling places leading up to and on election day. And we don't argue with people through social media, but what we like to do is when we see something really wackadoodle, or maybe even slightly wackadoodle, as long as it's wackadoodle, we're going to engage, right? What we do is that we like to make sure that the Office of the Secretary of State's information are put right into that feed, right? Because we're not trying to change the hearts of people that are clearly really dug into, right, the disinformation, right? We want to engage people that are viewing that, people that are just scrolling through things and are saying, oh, I didn't know that, polling places were closed at 2:00 this afternoon. Well, we know that's not true. But we like to make sure that in that feed, they'll see the Office of the Secretary of State's information. So that's what the digital side of election protection looks like. And then we've got the field work. So we're the folks that are out at the polling places within the distance that are provided for in statute. Of course, we don't fall into the electioneering category. Let me say that again. We do not fall into the electioneering category because we are not there to hand out information or engage people that are going to vote about a particular party. We've got big old nonpartisan election protection volunteer t-shirts on that say, if you have a question, do you have a question? Why do we do that? Because in communities of color, what we've seen is that we vote in groups. And when one of us is not able to, maybe we turned out at the wrong polling place, guess what the rest of us do? We go with that person to make sure that they're able to vote. And we don't always get a chance to go back and vote in our precinct, right? So that's just one example of the dynamics that we've seen through our election protection volunteer reporting back what they saw, right? Other people need language assistance. Other people, the majority of folks, quite honestly, what they're looking for is, hey, there's not a sign. There should be a sign, but there's not a sign that gives me the phone number I need to call so that election judges can come out and give me the ballot so I can vote in my car.
Okay. It sounds exciting. I know you said you have 18,000 people that's part of your organization, but for those other of us who are not actively involved, Karen had a question. How can someone join to help with this?
That's a really good question. So with the election protection program, or with any initiative or anything you see ever coming from Common Cause, if you ever have a question about it, I provided a resource sheet. In that resource sheet, you're going to see my email address and our office number. That's one way to do it. Just reach out to me. I'm very accessible. Karen knows this. I'm very accessible. I'm willing to meet anyone. If you just want to have a conversation about what you're like, hey, these are my talents. Maybe you're not the kind of person that wants to stand out and have that kind of contact with the public, but we've got a command center on election day. We could sure use your help in command center, right? And any volunteerism that you do, we train you into. We don't just throw you out there. We want to make sure you're having fun, and that's not just a cliche for us. We try to do goofy stuff because it's tough. It's very stressful, right?
Yes.
This is good work, but it's stressful work. So we try to help support each other and make sure that everyone feels comfortable.
Great. And I know Curtis put in the chat, but just a reminder to everyone, if you have a question, just go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat. I know that when I talked to Annastacia briefly, she wants questions. So if you have any, she would love to have that. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, Annastacia, just kind of in that same realm of election protection with everything that went on with Georgia and how, those two women got targeted. I'm afraid that people aren't going to volunteer to be election judges and those kinds of things. So is Common Cause doing any work around that, or any recommendations that you have to really get people to get engaged?
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. That's a really important question again, because in the state of Minnesota, we have gotten used to hearing Secretary Simon say, we are number one in the nation on voter, turnout, or we are number one in the nation on voter registration, or number two, which he doesn't like. He likes number one, and we do too. So I think, Karen, I thought about this. One of the most important thing that's happening right now, I will say, is being led by our partners, the League of Women Voters Minnesota. What they are doing, and I think it actually started last year, but I think Michelle, she's the executive director for the League of Women Voters. Michelle is doing some fantastic work preemptively. And what she's done is that she started connecting some of her league members. So if you're a league member, reach out to your state office. I think it's Sam who's going to be your point person, and you'll know who I mean. He's been the one that's been engaging y'all. Connect with Sam. They are matching league chapters with election officials in those counties. And that's important because our election officials hustle. Yes, we have, the North Star nationally best practice, but that's not because Steve is amazing. He is, but that's not why. It's because there's a lot of people behind the scenes making sure our elections are ready to roll, from making sure that the ballots are printed properly, making sure that election judges are trained, properly, these are folks that need support, right? And so what the league is doing is working with some of these election officials to preemptively identify what, especially this time around, because there have been so many changes in how elections are like the nuts and bolts of how the elections are going to be run. Now we've got a permanent absentee ballot. We'll talk about that in a bit. But you know what I'm saying? There's so much behind the scenes work. And because they're really taking that lead, the way we like to support is we don't like to duplicate. Right? There's enough to keep us busy. So what I do is support what they're doing. And so what we're doing is that in those counties where they don't have a league chapter, we're leaning in to do the same thing and support the election officials. So Karen, to your point, I think one of the most important things that we can do is let election officials and let our community member, because election judges are who? You and I get to lean in and to lean into those roles. There are laws that protect you now. It's sad that we have to say that now the laws are on the books, but the good thing is the laws are on the books. And so now we have a layer of protection. I don't want folks to feel like you're just going to be out there. Remember, those hotspots where we have seen issues, because we have in Minnesota, whether it's greater Minnesota or whether it's the Twin Cities Metro, First and Exeter Rings, Common Cause's election protection program is going to be coordinating. We've got a bunch of our partners, the league is one of them. We sit together, we strategize, and we figure out which are those risk counties. And we're going to put those election protection volunteers there so that they're also there to report things. We are not marshals. We do not get involved in any kind of safety issue, but we are those outside of the perimeters, people with the eyeballs that if we see something funky, like we did last time, we did have folks show up on a couple of trucks in some of the spaces that we had. We're there, boots on the ground, to let the election judges know in the actual place, and then connect with, it's up to them with how they want to handle it, but then they get to connect with local officials, officials as in the police, if that is necessary. It wasn't necessary last time around, but at least they were aware that people were congregating, which they're not supposed to do in the parking lots, and trying to shout things out as voters, to voters as they went in. Good question.
Go ahead, Carmen.
No, I was just going to say, so just looking at a couple of questions in the chat. So it's not like Common Cause contacts law enforcement. Common Cause would be in touch with the officials at the polling site to let them know what was going on, because it's their job to contact law enforcement.
Absolutely. We are not marshals. If you have heard of anybody, in fact, one of the things that we did in the 2020 election cycle was that there were other grassroots groups that were contacted by national organizations. And the good thing about it is that mostly, pretty much everybody knows Common Cause has always led the state's election protection program. And we lead it not alone in a vacuum. We lead it in partnership with other folks, right, that want to do the work, that want to volunteer. And so like ACLU Minnesota, I'll give you just a few. ACLU Minnesota, ACER, League of Women Voters. I mean, the Minnesota Clean Elections folks, Clean Elections, and I'm forgetting the name of Paul Halverson's group that takes care of all the monitoring and the election protection work at the end, like in the certification process. That group leads that. But no, we do not get involved. We did have some groups in the past that wanted something about defenders. I'm trying to think of the name, but they wanted to get involved more in a marshaling capacity. And we're like, no, we don't know. That's not what we do. We can't tell people what to do, but we let them know that that is not what we do. And actually by doing that, you're doing the opposite. You're not helping people at polling places by showing up. People feel intimidated if they see other people trying to cause, you know, any kind of argument or any kind of, we don't get involved in any of that. We're like the eyes and ears. That's all we do. We look, we listen. If we see anything weird, it's like the airport, right? If you see anything, say something. If you see something, say something. That's what we do.
You know, you provided, thank you for the additional, you provided a resource sheet and I put it in the chat. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about what you want people to know about the information?
Absolutely. So let me go in the chat. Okay. So what I did was that given what I learned about this space and the types of information that you all like to access, Common Cause doesn't like to tell people how to think. So ergo, the resource sheet. What you're going to see in the resource sheet is that I took a couple of really well-written pieces that did a really good job of spotlighting what some of those key reforms and key issues that were moved the last legislative session. I will tell you this before I continue with that sheet. I know that many of us have our positions. I'll include Common Cause in that. Many of us have our perspectives on how things can be better. But I will tell you this, sometimes the media likes to make it sexy with regards to like, how would I put this? Just, I don't know how to best put it, but just saying it that way. Sometimes the media tends to take a spin on something. And by the media, I mean just general media, because, you know, people like to hear, sorry about that. People like to hear something that is a little interesting as far as like the drama or whatever, but there are not a more hardworking group of people than the folks you see at that Capitol. And I'm there a lot. I don't always agree with their positions on democracy. I don't always agree with positions on other things that they take. I'm a human being. I have my own opinions. But I will say that I have not come across any member in that chamber either, or in either side, that is not in their mind thinking that they are truly working as hard as they can on the things that they care about the most. And I do have to say that because I don't hear a lot of people out there recognizing those folks. I hear a lot of criticism. I hear a lot of praise, but I don't hear a lot of people saying, hey, I don't have to agree with you to recognize and acknowledge how hard nobody's perfect and no dynamic is perfect. I just need to say that for the folks at the Capitol. The news should do a better job of covering that too, but they don't. Now, what I've done is that I've picked some pieces, and I encourage you to also Google it. Once you read the article, you'll intuitively know what things you want to, get more into the weeds over. But like the Sahan Journal, the Reformer, I tried to find pieces that I know really get into a little soft wonk over the issues, because at least my base likes information. They like to know, hey, what is this side saying? What is this side saying? And how do I feel about each side? So that's what you're going to see in some of the pieces. So what I did was that I went into what all happened after the legislative session. You don't see a lot of people, we're about to release our report on it, but you don't see a lot of people saying, hey, let's sit down with what actually moved in state and local government and elections. What moved? People know Restore the Vote moved. People know, the high things, right? 16 and 17-year-olds are able to now pre-register. People know that. But there's a whole lot of juicy stuff that's also in there. And it's not just moving a comma from here to here. right? So we want to make sure that you all understand what's happening. Unfortunately, I was hoping we had that, little baby report ready to provide the hyperlink. That's not in there, but I did provide a link to the actual conference committee report that was finally voted on and moved out and approved. So you will have an opportunity to go into that document, and it's okay to scroll. There's a whole lot of local stuff if you're not interested in that. But I will tell you that Article 3 is the article that talks about local and government policy. In that link, you'll see the hyperlink to that conference committee report. Article 4 is elections. You want to really go into that one. Article 5 is campaign finance. So those of you that are really looking into getting the nitty gritty, they did some good stuff on campaign finance. You're able to do that because, again, Common Cause doesn't like to tell people what to believe, but we do like to excite you with information and with opportunity to Q&A so that I'm able to just respond to some of those specific things and help you get to your own independent position on that. I know that there was a lot of sexy stuff going at the Capitol over Restore the Vote. Let me say something clear. Common Cause Minnesota has led, not Restore the Vote, ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting reforms in 3 states. Common Cause Minnesota and all of Common Cause supports ranked choice voting. We believe that the community and local government, not local government that way, but like the process, right, of moving the ordinance and what have you, we support Jean in a lot of the amazing work. Right now, we're helping her with the Minnetonka situation. They're trying to repeal that. So because that was such a focal point towards the end of the session and not a lot of discussion or opportunity to have this kind of discussion when it was all happening took place, I've been sharing information with folks on what's going on with ranked choice voting. You have the information on there. It is the very last on the conference committee. You're going to see where it talks about the Office of Secretary of State is going to do that voting study. If you look at the first paragraph, it specifically names ranked choice voting. The report is due in 2025. From my kind of off the brain, I am connecting with the Office of the Secretary of State to figure out how they're going to engage community. So you all will get a chance to have that, I don't know if they're going to call them town halls or whatever, but they're going to be engaging you all to hear your viewpoints and your perspectives, right? Which is super important. So that important work is going to be coming up. I provided the yes and the no on the Minnetonka situation in case you all want to get involved. Jean is, like I said, is leading that effort. If you want to support her, it's so important. Please reach out to Fairvote, Minnesota, Fairvote, Minnesota. And, ask Jean, hey, how do you need help? How can I help? I don't know if they have a petition, but that is going on. And I want to make sure that I flag that for everyone that I'm coming in contact with, because that is such an important reform.
Thank you. And thanks for providing that document. I think it's important information and a useful tool moving forward. But if I could shift gears just a little bit, we've heard a lot about redistricting. And I would like to hear from you. Why is redistricting so important to Common Cause?
So I'm going to give you the real on it. Because the way your question, I'm going to answer your question, because I am the only person staffing Common Cause right now. I am the only FTE staffing Common Cause. That's right. So all the wrestling of things that you've heard, it is me. It is me in partnership with some amazing colleagues and some amazing members. Again, like I said, we don't put words in people's mouths. So it's my job to engage our base and make sure that our base is knowledgeable about something and can have those conversations with their elected official. That to us is a strong democracy. I picked redistricting because I'm a civil rights attorney. And I don't believe in turning all the rocks. I believe in turning the rock. And before we can work for a multiracial democracy, that's the new buzz term, right? Before we can do that, though, we need to take a look at what is the base of that. So I'm a Latina. I'm going to use me as an example. I'm a Latina. We have some amazing allies, right, that really believe that all Minnesotans should experience democracy in the same way, right? And so I sat for the first year of my job and I thought to myself, We were in the restore the vote space, true story. We were in the restore the vote space, and I just was listening because I was trying to learn. I was trying to figure out, okay, I'm about getting to where we need to be. I'm not about talking and philosophizing and all this stuff, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to think, okay, so how do we get from protest to policy? How do we do that? How do we move that needle? Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here into perpetuity, philosophizing and sharing, but we're not going to be moving that needle. So let's look at restore the vote. We finally moved it. It took 2 decades, but we got there together, right? Okay. But that vote, even if you're not someone of color, depends on what? It depends on your vote actually mattering, right? So if you're in a district that does not appropriately reflect you, remember I said appropriately reflect you, fairly reflects you, because somebody has sat down, or in our case, because status quo has moved along, right? Then how powerful is that vote? Does the leading candidate or party in your district get to care? And now I'm going to talk real, because you asked me a real.
Real.
So real, I'm going to talk to you as a person of color in Minneapolis. And some of the districts whose margins of wins, I'm going to have you. Go ahead. Check the margin of wins of some of the pockets with the greatest populations of color. And then look at, does the brown and black vote matter? What if we have a different position on something? What if the constituency in that district does not agree with a particular approach of the party in that district on an issue? We support the party. Shouldn't that matter? That's question number 1. And question number 2, shouldn't the party or the candidate be asking us as a community, is this a solution for you, before you roll with it, call it multiracial, whatever? These are just questions, right? Because these questions should lead you and lean into your voting power. Because isn't voting power about the individual and the collective? Isn't that what we call coalition? When we sit and think about, right? This is what happens in redistricting. And that is where I went, wait a minute. So the power is sort of kind of in the vote, but from the small d perspective, the power is in your district. Those are your voting maps. So then I looked at how it happened in Minnesota. Now my national has a different perspective on what the solution might be. But again, I'm a small d person. So I was about, well, is it what I just say? Is it a solution because people that are impacted by it say it's a solution, understand the solution, have an opportunity to speak to that solution? Or is a solution because I, Annastacia, with a JD, an MA, and 2 undergrads, say it's a solution? Oh, and I happen to look like that person in the community. You see the difference there? Mm-hmm. So we're either going to role model what democracy truly looks like and stand by it. Now I'm talking about common cause. Or we're just going to buy into some of the terms and schlep same old. And community, you see, we're never going to get from protest to policy because we continue to do the same things over and over and expecting a different result. So I'm about doing things differently. I don't know if how I'm doing it is correct, but I do know that it's correct if I'm sitting with impacted people and having that conversation. If I'm going to hearings and I'm not seeing Annastacia sitting at the table talking about how well common cause believes, no, my job isn't, I talk to elected officials all the time. That's my job. But when it comes to hearing time, I firmly believe that that's the people's time. And it should be impacted community members sitting at that table and saying, we support this whatever because we believe this solution impacts us in this manner. That's the difference. So to redistricting, I selected it because I believe that's the seat of power in Minnesota. And I believe that the way that's happened in Minnesota has not included everyone, has not fairly and equitably ensured that all of us can experience democracy in the same way. It may work for the Democrats, it may work for the Republicans and how it's happened, which is why for how many decades now? one or the other side kicks the can.
Mhm.
I will say, though, that the House this time around, I'm just talking from a process perspective, kicked butt.
Yes.
They truly tried to reflect what that process should look like.
Mhm. Karen, you want to say what your comment was?
Well, yeah, that's my whole thing about redistricting. It's just the power to choose our electeds rather than electeds or parties choosing the voters. But Anastasia, I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about maybe some specific things that the House passed that you think is really going to have an impact, because I think sometimes so many things get lost in the weeds that we're not aware of the stuff, like you said, that the news isn't covering.
So just a clarification, are you saying, Karen, what they did with regards to how redistricting was done, or what they did as in the umbrella of democracy this last legislative session?
Either or both, whichever
I
you
was
think
gonna, I was
would have
gonna
the most
ask
impact.
before we shift away, did anyone have any questions or comments about redistricting? I'm sorry, redistricting that Karen talked about? All right, well then, I think Karen, your question.
Okay, so Karen said either or. I'll start with the easy one. Representative Ginny Cleavern is our chief author for the redistricting reform bill that we had dropped at that time, and for the redistricting bill that is going to roll this time. We're still doing focus groups with impacted community members. I just did a stakeholder focus group with some of our broader partners. And we're making sure that we're able to get as many perspectives in there as possible. That includes the Posse Caucus. And that also includes other key members of the House and Senate chambers. We hope to also be able to sit down. Well, we not hope, but we hope, because it's up to, working relationships with the 208 street, right? So our goal, our hope is that we're able to sit. We've already engaged. Representative Cleavern is already engaging. Representative Greenberg did amazing work on some of this. And we love like the lens that she sometimes provides to the work. And we hope to be able to engage the chairs of each of the elections committee. They're very important. They do a lot of hard work. And the role that they have in the committee, and I'm not just talking about their role in deciding and having the ability to decide what bills get heard or not. I'm talking about the role, broader role, right? It's so important. It's important. They're important stakeholders. It's important to make sure that we have an opportunity to sit and listen to their recommendations around the bill, or to their, concerns around the bill, or, whatever. It's important to engage them. So we want to do that. We hope to do that between, we've already started that in the beginning of the summer, but like we're continuing to engage folks as we move along on the redistricting side of things. And I do have to say that redistricting, unlike other bills, don't fall into the, our values tend to align more so with one particular party than another. Redistricting, power doesn't like to give up power. So redistricting has proven to be one of those where each side, there are nuances we need to address. Neither side likes to give up power, and that's squarely on redistricting. But having said that, this last redistricting cycle, Representative Cleavern, Representative Mary Murphy, we just got lucky, honestly. I think that pair, Representative Murphy was the chair of the redistricting committee, and Representative Ginny Cleavern was the vice chair. And I tell you, they were the most thoughtful people, like even, just the way that they were able to engage in the committee, the way that they were thoughtful. In fact, Representative Cleavern and Representative Murphy actually implemented a lot of our own process that's in the bill. It was sort of, I don't want to say it's a pilot because it wasn't a true pilot, but they implemented a lot of the very same things that we had proposed in the reform bill into how they engaged community. So we were able to see, does that approach really work? And I would argue that it did. If those of you that were following it, there was a lot of community input across the board. We were able to get a lot of impacted community members to testify, not just in the House hearings, but in the judicial and the redistricting panel judges hearings. Now, having said that, I would give them
Yeah.
a gold star. They were really doing awesome work. The Senate, not so much.
If I
The Senate,
if I can just pause you for one second, hold that thought. We have Senator Carlson's here, and I promised Lynn through email this morning that I would get him out by 9:45 because he is in the fire muster parade. So I would like to give him an opportunity. Senator Carlson, do you have any comments, anything that you want to say before 9:45?
Well, thank you, T, for giving me the opportunity to comment about it, Ted. And I want to thank Annastacia for her comments on redistricting. There, we do have to listen to a lot of opinions from the cross section. And as you may know, I'm the chair of the Senate Elections Committee. And what we're already working on redistricting issues right now, and in fact we met with Representative Cleavehorn a couple of days ago, and we will be doing whatever we can to make sure that whatever we hear this coming year is going to be something that looks towards the future. As the chair of that committee, we need to only hear things that make some sense, either in giving input or helping us craft the bill that can work statewide. And there's a big issue here that I'll say part of it, and that is that there are some people that want to do a constitutional amendment, and that there's always some negative to doing constitutional amendments, and that is that if you get too many, they fail, just because there's too many. So we have to be careful about that. And we do have a lot of people that are offering constitutional amendments right now. Let's just say if we have 3 of them, and one of them is the Equal Rights Amendment to the Minnesota Constitution, and we get a 4th one, it might cause the one that is our top priority to go down. So we have to be very careful about that. And again, we only have 1 vote majority in the Senate for the Democrats. That makes it tougher, because all we have to do is lose 1 vote and we lose the bill. So we have to be very careful about getting all of the senators on board. They have to be firmly on board before we go to the Senate floor. So that's somebody could say, okay, you guys have gotten lots done, which we did, but it makes it easy because you're in the majority. Well, no, it doesn't, because we have had, I've had screaming matches with some of our own senators to get things crafted to the way that we need to get every vote in the Senate to pass it. And I don't expect that to be much different in the next session. But I do have to say that as a senator, and as a senator in the majority, in that minor majority, I have had so many thank yous given to us this year. I staffed the State Fair Senate booth, and this is the very first year in my 15 years as a senator that we did not get 1 negative comment at the Senate booth in the fair, the very first year. So we did a great job in 2023, and we're expecting to do the same thing in 2024. We need to protect our majority, and that's going to help us get whatever we need for the next round of work. So we need to make sure that we keep that House majority, because the Senate is not up for election in 2024. But we need to make sure that we keep that House majority. And if we have any members that might in the Senate decide to run for another office or to do something else, we need to make sure that we get a classic person to be able to replace that person. So I want to thank Annastacia. I was at her stakeholder group the other day, and I learned a lot. And my committee administrator, as some of you may know, was the Deputy Secretary of State under Mark Ritchie. So there is no one who knows elections that is connected with the Senate that is better than Beth Fraser to be able to do some advising of things that we need to get done, how they get done, And then what are the roadblocks to it? So and one other thing I'd like to just cover for a second is that ranked choice voting, I've been a strong supporter of ranked choice voting for a long time, but we have a couple of issues. One is that the two cities that have it, Minneapolis and St. Paul, we get feedback that some people are not valuing it as highly as us promoters of it. And there's very organized opposition to it, and like Annastacia mentioned, in the western suburbs, they want to repeal it, and there's a group that wants to repeal it statewide, and we need to fight against that. So that's one. The other one is that because we have a different way of counting our votes in Minnesota than other states that have ranked choice voting, the Secretary of State is working hard on trying to figure out a way that we can count the votes between, for instance, cities that might be in the same district, counties that might be in the same district. And Representative Cleghorn said something that the other day when we were meeting with her, is that what does a smaller county think about a large that's in the same district as a larger county, when the larger county is doing the counting and reallocates votes when you do ranked choice voting? And that's something we have to work on to make sure that counties are 100% behind it. And so that's one of the reasons why we did not pass the element in ranked choice that gives locals the ability, no matter what their district is and no matter when their elections are held, to be able to have ranked choice voting. So it's a step that seems small, but it is a major issue for the Secretary of State. So we're going to try to resolve all of that with this study, and also make sure that people see the advantage in ranked choice voting, so that when they go to the polls, they don't just pick one person to vote for. We call that bullet balloting. And they will also look at their second choice. So thank you for having me on here. And yes, I have to go to the fire muster parade in Burnsville. And I appreciate you having Annastacia on here, because she provides a lot of information for people to understand all of the things that go into our voting. So thank you again. And
well, thank you, Senator.
Everyone.
I was so happy that you could be here. So thank you. Have fun at the parade.
Thank you.
Anastasia, do you have any thoughts and comments about what Senator Carlson talked about?
Yeah, totally. I just think that it was so cool because Beth was with Senator Carlson when we did a stakeholder. Actually, right, just to show you how important the participation is, right after she came and gave me two little tidbits on the proposed component of the bill, and we came back and were able to adjust it. So we were able to, to include both of her recommendations on that. And again, to Senator Carlson's point, drafting a bill that successfully is able to make it across the line is it's not a one person thing. Nobody sits in a room and comes up with like this thing that is perfect. It's got to be something that you're doing together. Because all of us have different perspectives, and communities expect us to keep them first, right? The impacted people, Minnesotans expect us that when we're sitting doing the sausage that I've heard it described as, that it's being done with a recipe with people in the center. That means that there's a give and a take, right? That means that we need to be able to compromise within the reality. And what Senator Carlson talked about with regards to the constitutional amendments is spot on. Last time I checked, there was 10 to 12 constitutional amendments. However, it is up to leadership to decide of those 12, because all 12 don't roll just because somebody submits them. The House and the Senate, to Senator Carlson's point, has to vote and agree that those things are going to be put on the ballot. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's not that, there's 12 that are competing after the fact. It's that leadership has to decide which, how many and which of those 12 is going to be put to the floor for that debate and for that challenge. And Senator Carlson was spot on. We have to be able, if we lose Democrats in the Senate, we got to gain Republicans. And I'm just going to talk about the redistricting CA right now, right?
Right.
However, our bill proposes something that the others don't. I have to stress this. our constitutional amendment, as it sits now, I'm not saying that it'll change. I'm just saying, as it sits now, the constitutional amendment that we have defaults to an advisory redistricting commission if it fails on the ballot. So from our perspective, community wanted a win-win. And that's the win-win, right? Because, right? Because power doesn't always give up power easily. And sometimes institutions are used as a way of keeping power from community, right? So it's a nice way of saying, I'm not saying, let me just say this. I'm not saying, remember, I'm a strategist. I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about the system. I'm not talking about a person, right? Or a party. I'm talking the system, right? It's easy to say, you know, the constitutional amendment won't work because of 1, 2, 3, we're done. So into perpetuity, communities are never going to see anything because political power in Minnesota, we're not a ballot initiative state. So political power in Minnesota is never going to want to give up that power. Sometimes we have to be innovative and outwit and outsmart on behalf of our communities. There are lobbyists in that capital that their suits cost more than 2 of my salaries. Don't you think that communities and people, Minnesotans, deserve that? They deserve that too. So we're going to lobby hard. We're going to lobby hard and hold power accountable. I don't know what that's going to look like, right? But we've got good elected officials in the Senate. We have good elected officials in the House. And I am confident that at the end of the day, we're going to be able to move something that people can really rally behind. That's my thing on the redistricting end.
Thank you. And thank you for responding to Senator Carlson's comments. Because we only have 10 minutes left and there's so much information that I want you to share. I know that Senator Carlson talked about ranked choice voting in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and that there's a campaign for people, you know, that's going out that people are opposed to it. What's Common Cause's position on ranked choice voting?
We support ranked choice voting. I mean, I agree with Senator Carlson's, you know, observations. I think he's spot on with that. I think I'm going to say something. I was very disappointed that local ranked choice voting was not moved last legislative session. I know that there was some concern and debate over state and federal because the bill that was proposed moved local, state, and federal. And there is a lot of peanut butter. Those of you that have heard me talk about, there's a lot of peanut butter involved in every single layer of that, right? And you just heard Senator Carlson do an excellent job of pointing out what some of that peanut butter looked like, right? So it's not a matter of just rolling out with a reform. It's a matter of, you know, how you roll it out. But at a local level, I thought the language that was included that talked about the standardization of what that process looked like at a local level. I mean, I'm just sharing my disappointment. I was really disappointed that that minimally when we walked away from, you know, the RCV, how it started to be proposed and how it ended up, I was really disappointed that minimally at a local level, we don't have now, you know, across the board standard, you know, ranked choice voting. You know, and again, should those local governments choose to opt in? Because I think that I've heard that a lot from some of the local government folks. Is like, you know, I wish that there was like the standardized thing, right? And not like so much in, you know, I don't want to say lack of, but that's one thing that I will say about RCV and what I wish would have happened. I think the other thing that needs to happen is more direct engagement, kind of like what we're doing with the redistricting bill, right? I think that some of the dynamics that Senator Carlson talked about would be addressed, at least the first one, right? With regards to people perceiving this a certain way. I think if people were to have opportunities to sit, whether it's workshop format or whether, you know what I'm saying? Or whether, thank you, Senator Carlson. You know, whether it's, you know, workshop format or whether it's public, you know, town hall format, but we need to do a better job of sitting with people that are impacted. And if it's the 2 largest counties or whatever, how that goes, and really having those focus groups. What do you understand as ranked choice voting? What do you want to see from, you know, ranked choice voting? What is it? And you know what else? I did this anyway. I met with some of the candidates that did not make it through ranked choice voting. And I said, what was your experience with it? Number one thing, I didn't understand. You know, and the problem, in my opinion, one of the problems is that if you don't have the candidates championing it, if you don't have the candidate saying, this is amazing, and these are the reasons why, and let's talk about this, and being part of that education and that outreach, then, you know, you might not have a constituency that truly understands why our CV is a good thing, right? For
Right.
their local elections.
Right. Thank you. Anyone have a comment or question? Karen, I've seen 2 in the chat that you put in. Anyone else? If not, Karen, I'll turn it over to you. You have a question or comment?
Oh, no, I was just going to add that I was confused about what ranked choice voting was. And actually it was a session with the old 52 when they had somebody come out and talk about it, that like all of a sudden it all clicked, like, oh, that's what it actually looks like. It's not as complicated as I thought it was. And it gives the voter so much more power, because then all of the electeds have to vie for our vote. Whatever party, whatever, you know, they have to really think about who their constituents are, versus just wanting to retain power, because we could put somebody else as number 2 and they could end up in sorry shape. So I've been a really strong supporter. So I think education is a really huge piece of that. And can I just make one personal comment? If you ever really want to know how the sausage is made at the Capitol, link up with Annastacia, because I have run with her when the group is like looking for sponsors for bills and doing all of that. And as constituents, we can do that. And it's so empowering. Again, that education piece, it's so empowering to actually see it in action and understand all that our legislators do, and that their primary job is not about necessarily like being with us all the time in every spot here, but really doing the work at the Capitol that's on our behalf long term, that's going to make a difference generationally for us.
Yeah,
All right.
remember, folks, they are your lobbyist.
Yes.
Your elected official is supposed to be your lobbyist, not the party's lobbyist, not the special interest lobbyist, not, hey, I want to win my next election lobbyist. It's your lobbyist. That requires them to come back and engage you around those important key items. Like right now, it requires them to check in and say, how do you feel about redistricting constituency in their respective districts? How do you feel about ranked choice voting? How do you feel, right? And then taking that feedback and then figuring out what, you know, Senator Carlson talked about, which is so spot on. I mean, you know, one thing is to idealize democracy, and another thing is to navigate the reality of democracy at the Capitol, right? Nobody talks to you about that. I'm happy to come back at any other point. Follow me on social media. Thank you so much, T.
No, I was going to ask you just a quick update for everyone. Today, as Senator Carlson talked about, the fire muster parade in Burnsville. I don't have the exact location where that is in Burnsville, but Len said that she still has 13 spots open.
Oh.
So she's looking for anyone who's able to come join to march in a parade with her and Representative Liz Ryer. So if you or you know anyone who can go and turn out for our district, that would be great. And Annastacia, I want to thank you so much. I know I'll keep saying your name wrong and I apologize. I want to thank you for being our guest today and for sharing so much information. And I would like to give you the closing remarks. Anything that you want us to know, was excited about 2024, and any other things that you want us to know as we close out our coffee conversation.
Okay. So what I put in the chat box right now is a way for folks to specifically get involved in redistricting. I would love to be able to partner with you all or any other group or any other space that you all are engaged in and do a focus group. Focus groups can be as many as 5 people. It could be as many as 30 or 100. Well, maybe not 100, but maybe like 30 people, because, you know, focus means focus for a reason. And host one. In a focus group, we sit down and we look at the proposed components of the bill, the model of the redistricting commission, the process of how they would engage one another, and the redistricting principles. I want to make sure that no matter where you land on the issue, that you're able to have that conversation with your elected official and say, okay, well, hang on a second. You know, the bill that you're moving looks like this. The bill that Common Cause is moving looks like this. Why? Why is there a difference? Because the devil is in the detail. And so if y'all want to find out what the process looks like, if y'all want to learn about what does the Senate committee look like, what does it mean to have these, you know, debates on the floor, right? Then join us. That is a way for me to be able to get you on the redistricting specific listserv so that you're not bombarded with everything else. So it's a petition that simply says we agree that whatever redistricting happens in Minnesota, it should be people-centered, people-focused, and people-driven. If you agree, I invite you to sign on.
Thank you. Thank you, Annastacia. Thank you so much for being our host. Thank you, everyone, for attending September 9th Coffee Conversation with T and our special guest from Common Cause. Thank you, Kern, for helping to facilitate some of the logistics in the background to get our special guest here. I appreciate you as always. And thank you, everyone. I will see you on Monday when we have our next outreach and communications meeting happening at Devani's here in Eagan. So if you're able to join us, please feel free to join us in person at 6 p.m.